In this video, I will be walking you through a plus 18 Halls of Infusion that I have done during the first week of Season 2 on my 417 item level Protection Paladin. I will be walking you through the key, giving you commentary and real-time analysis of what exactly has happened. I will be calling out mistakes that I have done and that you should learn from and avoid during your runs, as well as several trash mechanics and boss mechanics that you should look out for, and share with you my input on how I think you should best deal with them. If you like this style and format of video, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you get value from this video at the end, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And now let's get right into it. All right, lovely people, welcome to the first Mythic Plus analysis and commentary of Season 2. And we will be kicking it off today with a plus 18 Halls of Infusion. It is one of the Dragonflight dungeons, one of the 4 remaining ones. And I have a love-hate relationship with this one, and I'll point things out as we go through it. Here in the beginning, I immediately pop my Sentinel because you want to use all your cooldowns. I group these 2 packs together. These packs can be quite daunting to deal with. There are a lot of mobs with priority interrupts. You have the big floaty orbs. They will cast a big AoE that needs to be stopped. And one of the issues that we actually ran early on in this key with this group was the fact that they were using their AoE CC pretty haphazardly, making the mobs immune. If it's one thing I talk about a lot, is the problem with pugs is not the fact that they don't use interrupts. It's not the fact that they don't use their AoE or single target CC. The problem is too many people use them at the same time, putting multiple of them on cooldown, not having them for other waves of interrupts, and also making the mobs immune to future CC. So you can see here, these mobs are quite dangerous to deal with, and we need to really understand what is the priority interrupt so that we do not mess up. We don't just want to go in, stun everything on the first cast, knock up, knock back, etc. We want to individually target key mobs. And one thing that I do is I am trying to mark these mobs because I have key binds for all of the markers as well as the world markers. But somebody in the group was using an auto marker weak aura, which was pretty much destroying the fact that I could single target mark the mobs. It's quite useful when you don't necessarily know what to deal with. But if your tank knows how to deal with and he's comfortable marking, and he does request, like I did at the start of the dungeon, to turn that weak aura off, it would be tremendously helpful for anybody that is running an auto marker to turn it off. The reason why we go on the left is because of this orb right here. So we pull this pack because after this pack it gets defeated, an engineer can interact with that orb. It can interact with it. You can see there. And you're going to get, as it says on the screen, limited immortality for the whole group. So basically you get a buff that lasts for 60 minutes, and it's going to prevent the first time that you will take fatal damage. And the opposite side is actually going to give you the shortcut to the last boss in case you wipe anywhere between the, I would say the 3rd boss and the 4th boss. So if you're running a pug that doesn't necessarily know how to run this dungeon properly, you can go and clear the other side, the right side of this big circle coming here, skip the immortality buff, but now you will have a skip just in case you are going to wipe at a certain point on the trash or on the bosses. Personally, I like going left side because of the immortality buff, and I realize that this is a pug. But if you are also confident and you start with the mindset of, hey, I am going to defeat this dungeon, we're not going to wipe and we need a skip, then you're probably going to do the same thing as me here. These packs of mobs, they have different types of casts, from demoralizing shouts to AoE, spell damage. It's going to be pretty easy to deal with once you get a grip of them. The first boss, and this is a tyrannical boss, starts at lower HP, and he does that Titanic Fist, which is going to stun you, and you will see me get stunned a couple of times in this run. And then he's going to start this AoE cast. It pulsates, I believe, 3 or 4 waves of AoE damage, and it really hurts. And when I say it hurts, I mean like it really, really hurts. See, there I got stunned by the frontal. And what you want to do, especially if you are playing a druid, you can Nature's Vigil. If you are playing a paladin and you see me mouse over my party frames quite often and trying to use my Word of Glories to top people off as much as possible, I am going to use my Hand of Sacrifice in order to prevent damage on certain members. It's really, really useful. And you can see here a debuff that goes on 3 individual members, and they leave these pools on the ground. You can, if you look at my nameplates, at my group frames on the left, the party frames, you will see that debuff happening. And again, the group is taking a lot of damage. We're not yet halfway through the fight, and the healer has less than 50% mana. We're quite struggling here a little bit. Here, the debuff goes off, you can see on the left side, and it's 2, 1, and they're going to put down the puddles. They're taking it out, which is good, but I think they ran pretty far away, and we're not really maximizing DPS on this boss. The biggest problem with this first boss is the fact that the damage is pretty much out of whack. When he reaches 50% of his initial starting HP, he's going to go to the middle, become immune, and he's going to start empowering himself. And then he's going to spawn these orbs that you see here. You want to prioritize and destroy 3 of them as fast as possible. And make sure you defeat them on top of the boss. That circle needs to touch the boss because he has 3 stacks of the shield. So when 3 of them explode on top of him, those 3 stacks of the shield are going to come down. The boss is going to become active again. And if you can see on the nameplate of the boss, right on the right side, there is a yellow buff with 20 stacks, which means that the boss has managed to get 20 stacks during that transition phase, and now he's going to do that much more damage. At this point, you're never going to go into that phase again. It only happens once, and the faster you're out of it, the less damage the boss is going to do. I get stunned again here. Debuffs are going out, and you can see the circles are much bigger, and the circles are bigger because the boss also got his abilities empowered. At this point, my healer's mana isn't looking so good. I'm trying to off-heal as much as possible. At this point, I know that the only way in which we can pretty much wipe on this boss is if I allow somebody to die, to take fatal damage. Again, people are running out. The circles are huge. They're huge. And the boss only got like 20 stacks. The hunter ends up dying. I did have lay on hands, but I decided to keep it for the healer. Maybe it would have been good to lay on hands the hunter there because we also do have another paladin, and maybe he could have done it. I don't know. Anyway, we both have bubble. Here, I want to res the hunter because I want my healer to regen. And unfortunately, he didn't. He rezzed the hunter himself. Here, one of these mobs are in stealth. The zealots are in stealth, and they stunned me. If this was fortified, I would have probably proc my cheat death there, or worse, I would have maybe sustained fatal damage. But I just want to defeat these 3 mobs, and when I'm going to pull the next pack, I'll explain why. Just going back to the previous idea, if somebody in your party dies, don't let the healer res them if you can res them. You res them so that the healer can drink. And this is something that I see so many healers doing the mistake of. They don't allow other people to res, and they want to do everything themselves. So let's talk about these packs because these are very dangerous. Once you go close to the door, you will activate like a gauntlet and these mobs will start spawning. You can see there's a bunch of toads and there's a few like birds type mobs. If you watch the party frames, there's going to be a green debuff that's going on my party members, as well as some stacks. When those stacks reach 10, you will die instantly. And these are poisons, so you can dispel them, especially as a paladin. If you take cleanse, detox, all of these spells are going to help you. See, so there he has high stack, so I cleanse him, and because he would have taken 2 more, he would have gotten instantly 1 shot. And this is more about understanding what the mobs do and how to prevent them from doing those things. Here, there's another Zealot in stealth there. I managed to get in combat before he could stun me right out of it. I'm going to pop Sentinel. And these two mobs, you can see the Dragonflights, we're just going to call them birds. I call every single mob that is flying a bird. That's pretty much what happens at the high level. People don't call mobs by the individual names, but what they are. They cast this spell called Dazzle, and it's cast on the tank, and it disorients the tank. When the tank is disoriented, all the other mobs start focusing everybody else. So here, there's another bunch of mobs in stealth. I get in combat before those mobs manage to stun me. And again, the same thing. You can see the nameplates that are with purple are mobs that are casters, and at a certain point, they're going to cast a spell that needs to be interrupted. So if you guys want my plater profile, let me know in the comment section down below. And actually, you can check out the Patreon page for more information on that. Maybe I'll make it public. But the reason why I have this is because I want to differentiate between mobs that have spellcasts and mobs that do not have any spellcasts. So this is a great example here. These two mini bosses, one of them is a caster that constantly uses fire abilities, and the other one just does physical damage abilities. And by you differentiating between the two, you will know which mob to set on focus and do focus kicks, focus interrupts, focus knocks, etc. while focusing down the main target. They also do, you saw she uses that spell called Cauterize, and it's basically a big heal. She's either going to cast it on herself or on the other mob. Occasionally, they will spawn some additional small trash mobs. It's very easy to get threat on them. You know, Death and Decay, Thunderclap. With your Consecration, monks should have no problem with the Spinning Crane Kick and also the Rushing Jade Wind. Druids also, that's not a big problem for you to get threat on those. Those are not the most important ones. And here we're going to go into the second boss, the Frog Boss, which quite honestly, I will have to say, I think I did this boss probably 30 times, and I still have no idea what happens in this fight. All I know is that we have a druid, and at a certain point, this mob is going to enrage, and the druid is going to be able to soothe it, and that's pretty much it. These frogs also drop from the sky, and they're the same types of mobs that we discussed on the trash. So again, they're going to put the poison debuff on a party member. If it reaches 10, that person is going to get one shot. And I do my best to cleanse them as much as possible. The boss also puts down a slow, and you saw me there use Hand of Freedom. I also have another talent for Hand of Freedom, which increases my movement speed, and I can use it on a different party member as well. And another thing that this boss does is when he enrages, he tends to do like this jump plus like a big gulp, like a big circle around it, and he's gonna gulp either one of the mobs that is around him. So it's good. You might see it here in just a second. There, that's the circle. So he's going to gulp somebody, right? So he's going to gulp a party member, he's going to gulp somebody, and that person is going to take some extra damage. It's good to, it's proximity based, so the closer you are to the boss, that's the person that's going to get gulped. And I believe it's also going to gulp one of the frogs if nobody else is in the range. And if he doesn't gulp anybody, he's going to enrage. And he does a lot of damage. Now, I'm not going to worry about it because I have a druid, but I believe they nerfed that ability a couple of times because the enrage would pretty much double or triple the boss's damage. And if you were not 100% HP, could literally one-shot you in just one hit. Storming also makes things a little bit annoying. It's not the end of the world, but it's a little bit annoying, especially on bosses that have a bunch of different mobs that have mechanics which can one-shot you, area of effect denial, or things falling from the sky that you don't want to get hit by. It just adds a bunch of clutter on the floor. So this boss is now in execute range. This is good for me, the hunter, as well as the other paladin. Over here, we will see the boss is going to gulp. And these frogs managed to get quite a number of stacks on a few party members. We do a great job at removing that poison debuff He's going to jump again. Do not stand in the jump. It does a lot of damage, and especially if the boss is enraged, it's going to most likely one-shot. Once you defeat this boss, this is probably the most interesting set of trash that I have fought in quite some time. And I'll explain to you guys why. So you see how these dragons, they have a certain color. So this is a frost dragon, and you can see by the color of it, the way in which, you know, they have the frosty, pointy things. But also, pay attention, there are some mobs. So you have mobs that are earth callers, ice callers, fire wardens, etc. So these NPCs, these humanoid NPCs, are associated with a certain type of spell. So if they're ice, and they happen to stand close to an ice dragon, their abilities are going to empower one another. So the mob that is earth is going to empower an earth type dragon. The fire one is going to empower a fire type dragon. The ice NPC is going to empower the ice/frost dragon. Now, in high fortified, I really believe that you will not have a great time when dealing with these mobs, but I think there are ways around it. You can either choose to, for example, go and CC all of the NPCs that are the same type as the dragons and just do a big pull of all of those dragons and the other types of humanoids that are not the same element as the dragon, in case, you know, you're fearful that something like bolstering plus fortified, etc., can be quite a big threat for the tank. Or my preferred way is to just make sure that you pull decently big, you use big offensive cooldowns and big defensive cooldowns, and make sure that you defeat the NPC corresponding to the element of the dragon that is in the pool. So just use all of your cooldowns. Don't AoE. Just single target that mob down. Put a skull on it. Put something. Tell your team, hey, I'm going to mark things with the skull. If they're marked with the skull, that means that it's priority to be defeated. As you can see there, right, I marked one of the NPCs with the skull, but two other mobs that had different marks died first before the skull mob. And that can be quite frustrating, especially as a tank, because another thing that I say that is quite often happens, I get a lot of feedback from you guys, comments, whispers in game. You say things like, I don't understand why my tanks keep dying, and then I ask you, you know, and you tell me, hey, look back, have you recorded, did they use their defensive cooldowns? And I would say that 95% of you say that all of your tanks are using their cooldowns, but yet they still die. Should you blame the healer? I would actually say no. It's not really the tank's fault, and it's not really the healer's fault. It's a combination of the whole group. It's because the DPS did not have enough damage to defeat the mobs or the boss before the tank ran out of defensive cooldowns. So now we're on the third boss, and this is a very interesting boss. So you can see she has these pillars. So one pillar is darker color and the other one is whiter in color. So I marked this one so that everybody knows you should hide behind the one that is darker in color. And here's the reason why. The pillars that have a darker color, they are not yet brittle. The ones that are white in color, they're brittle. So when she is going to use abilities such as the Cyclone, and you'll see here in a second, right? So she does that Cyclone. If that Cyclone hits a white pillar, it's going to destroy it. And if it hits a dark colored pillar, it's going to make it brittle. It's going to make it white. Also, when she does the big AoE unavoidable damage when you run behind one of the pillars, you don't want to run behind a white colored one. You want to go behind a dark colored one, because the white colored one is going to get destroyed. You're going to take the full damage of the ability and most likely get one shot. And when she does the big circles on the ground, this is like Kurog, right? The one of the final bosses of one of the wings in the last raid that we had. It's pretty much the same mechanic. So she's going to do a circle on top of her, then on the second third, and on the last third of the room. So just make sure you're not in melee range, and then go back into melee range, and you should be good. This is not a difficult boss. So you can see here, right? In melee range, and then in the next third, and then the last third, And that's pretty much it. So you don't have to worry about the last circle is going to be so far away. That's not important. Just make sure you do not get hit by the tornado. When she does the hailstorm, make sure you hide always behind the dark colored ice thingy, right? Always behind the dark colored one. And all of those ones that are dark colored are going to become brittle, are going to become white. Here I bubble, that's why I stand in it, because I just wanted to DPS. The hunter ends up going down. It's fine. This boss isn't too complicated. Just make sure you do not mess up your abilities. The way in which you handle the boss's abilities too much. Make sure you do not hit healthy dark colored pillars with the tornado, because that's going to make them brittle. And if they're brittle, you will not be able to hide when she does the hailstorm. One other thing that I will say is, if you happen to have storming tornadoes spawn when that affix happens, try to eat it. So if you're a Death Knight, you can press your Death's Advance. You can use Anti-Magic Shell and so on in order to eat those abilities. And as a tank, it's better if you press a defensive and stay outside, take the storming, instead of having your whole group die. So this is a gauntlet. This is probably the least fun part of the dungeon. So there was a bug here. You can see that it says evade, 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 evade on the mobs. So certain mobs don't evade, but certain mobs do evade. So you saw they evaded. So you can line of sight these swirly, I guess, watery type thingies by hugging these, I would call them central pillars, but you can also hug the pillars that have the lights on top of them, because they function in the same way. However, I did this dungeon several times on PTR and several times when it was just M0 version, and the mobs never evaded on these first ones. Now, we're in quite a bit of a conundrum, because as I said, this is a gauntlet. So the mobs are going to permanently spawn, come down the middle. And here, again, like, that mob ran away. It evaded. And I'm not entirely sure if this was something intended by Blizzard to make this a non-gauntlet type, I guess, area. But those mobs went back. Here, a bunch of my teammates, they've been arguing. They've been going back and forth. They've been arguing the whole dungeon. That's why I pretty much used one of my pictures to hide the chat over there. They've been going back and forth at it whole dungeon. They have no idea what they're talking about, just, chatting out of their minds. But basically, we realized, or at least I realized, because we weren't on comms, I said, okay, I think Blizzard tried to create this area to make it a non-gauntlet type area, so we're not permanently in combat, so that, in case somebody dies, we can res like we just did. And I thought, okay, maybe there's something related to that specific entrance area that makes mobs evade, because else I don't know how else they could do it. So I decided to no longer use those 3 frontal pillars in order to avoid the swirlies, and decide to pull further up. And these mobs are quite annoying. I will say that the biggest threat here is the fact that you will get knocked into the water as the tank. You will lose threat on these mobs, and they will turn and one-shot your party. You can see now we weren't hit by that swirly. We're not going to get hit by this one. Again, we're sitting in a good position. And just make sure, right, you're careful about which ones you're using over here. We will also have a mini boss once these 4 water elementals will be defeated. These guys, they will enrage, so they have like an enrage effect on themselves, and it stacks with raging. And they also have a cast that preferably you will be able to interrupt. The mini boss is here. She has 2 abilities. One of them is going to hit everybody in the party, and the other one's going to put a big area of effect. This one, the swirly, so you want to get out of it. Make sure you do not get hit by that, because It does damage, but more importantly, it knocks back. And it knocks back in every single direction, depending on where you're sitting in the circle. So make sure you interrupt her cast. Make sure you do not stand in the swirlies. When she does this damage, unavoidable damage, just make sure you use a minor defensive. Heal yourself back up. Do not stand in this so you don't get knocked. Rinse and repeat. Make sure you dance around this central pillar so you do not get knocked by the swirlies that are continuously spawning. Here, I proc my cheat death. I almost went down there using a few off heals in order to stay alive. The healer is doing quite a good job here, although the healer is so we better wrap up this part of the gauntlet as fast as possible. And then after we do this, all we have to do is just defeat the final boss. And as you guys will see in just a second here, it was a complete clown fiesta. We still have about 8 minutes left of this dungeon, which is plenty of time to defeat this boss. And because this boss fight can take quite a while, depending on how much DPS you have. And considering that it's an 18 pug, tyrannical, yeah, I was expecting at least 2 transitions. So we engage the boss fight, and this boss fight tends to be quite hectic for a lot of people. Many people don't understand how this fight works. So I will do my best in order to explain it. And you will see here a couple of attempts that were failed and we wiped. But the final attempt, even though the key was depleted, we managed to defeat the boss. One big problem that I have with this fight is the visuals. There's a whole bunch of blue on the ground. The boss is blue, the swirlies are blue, the abilities are blue, the water in which you sit, the whole room is blue. Yeah, it's a little bit tough. And also, the abilities that the boss use are going to make everybody split apart. When we went into that transition phase, that previous attempt, we had 2 people down. There was no point in continuing. So we made sure that we went again. By the way, you saw that the time went from 37, 38 minutes all the way to 41 minutes. And that's because the run back to this boss is a whooping 2.5 minutes for paladins or any other basically characters that do not have something that they can use to increase their movement speed all the time. No, like sprints and so on. So it was a very long run back. I accidentally released. I did not see that the shaman said that he could ank and res everybody up. Here we go into the transition phase again, and this pool is looking quite good. So let me talk about the transition a little bit, and then when we'll do the final pool, I'll explain the boss himself. So here you will see the swirlies coming down. Make sure you line of sight. And then those blue, let's call them tiers that are in the middle, they will do a lot of frost damage if you touch them, and they will continuously do damage. Once somebody reaches the middle of the room, all of the spells during the lanes will just stop. Here you will have 4, let's call them ads. And what they do is they keep channeling on the boss. The problem is that if you keep them channeling on the boss, it will put stacks. I don't know what's with Blizzard and this dungeon. They just love giving us these bosses that get empowered the longer the fight goes on. So this boss gets empowered by 4 different NPCs. And then you have to use kicks in order to stop their casts. They're going to start focusing on you, but then they will do this uninterrupted, unkickable AoE burst that is going to hit everybody if you do not stun them, knock them, disorient them, etc. At this point, this is where I'm actually going to do a mistake. Remember when I said that everything in this boss fight is colored blue? At this point, I just was not able to see things. So this, I get hit by the tank mechanic, I go back, I'm not full HP, that's my mistake, and I run into a swirly and I get one shot. All right, let's talk about this boss fight on our successful attempt. I know we depleted the key, So here's basically what it goes. When he casts this Tempest Fury, it's an AoE frost damage effect on everybody in the party. You cannot avoid it, okay? You have to take it. So press a minor defensive just so you can survive it. Right after, he's going to spawn these swirlies. And then he's going to do the tank knockback. When he does the tank knockback, you can bubble, you can use anti-magic shell. I believe you can spell reflect it. I haven't yet tested it on the warrior. But you can definitely use a defensive ability. You will not be able to negate the knockback unless you use an ability like, for example, Death Knight can use anti-magic shell. They can also use their movement speed increasing effects, and that's going to negate the knockback. But as a paladin, the only thing that works against the knockback is going to be your Blessing of Spell Warding. He teleports us during the gauntlet phase. Again, we're running. I'm using Hand of Freedom on the other paladin. He doesn't realize it that I'm giving him movement speed, so he uses his horsey at the same time. A little bit of a waste there. And we managed to get through. And now here's how to best handle these mobs in the middle. What you want to do, like the last boss in No Kid Offensive, Balakar Khan, you want to hard CC, so like Hex, Trap, etc., 2 of them, to make sure they don't empower the boss, and you handle the other 2. Here, we ended up doing 3. Even though the paladin called out for a hex, the shaman hexed a mob and the paladin didn't care. He just hit the mob that was hexed. Here, 2 of them cast their uninterruptible, unkickable, I would say, spell, but definitely stunnable. And 3 of our members almost get one shot. And over here, let's see, we have the last trash mob, I would say add. And this is where the mechanics of the boss are going to repeat. So he's going to do the Tempest Fury, unavoidable AoE damage. See, everybody takes quite a bit of damage. They took way more damage than before. He spawns the swirlies, and this is where he's going to do the tank buster. And I'm going to use Blessing of Spell Warding. Here we go. Boom. Actually, no, I bubbled this one. I did not spell warding this one. I'm going to spell warding the last one. I bubbled this one. I still got knocked back, but it prevented the damage. And just make sure that you do not walk into the swirlies, and make sure you try to keep yourself topped off for when he does the big AoE spell. And do not hesitate to use your cooldowns here as much as possible. The boss auto attacks don't deal that much damage. And I will say, I want to debunk a myth that was started by the Retribution Paladin in this group. He kept saying that the reason why we are wiping is because we're taking fatal damage because I'm losing threat on the boss, and because I'm not sitting close enough in melee range. Let me just debunk that myth once and forever, okay? The boss has the hitbox of a house. So it doesn't matter if you are sitting right on top of him or if you are sitting where these NPCs are right now. The boss will still melee you, and you will still be able to melee the boss. The hitbox is huge. It's huge. And the boss doesn't have any preference on who to hit based on proximity. It's only based on threat. And my nameplates, every single time you will see my nameplates having green color, you will know that I have 100% safe threat on that NPC. If the color is a dark blue, that means that the off tank is about to pull threat off of me. And if it's orange color, then that means that I am losing threat to somebody in my party that is not a tank. Look at the nameplate of the boss. It's green, and it has always been green. So it's not because people don't die on this boss fight because your tank mispositions. It's not because your tank is not sitting close enough to the boss. It's simply because, see, I use spell warding here. I don't get knocked back and I prevent the damage. People are taking damage and they're dying in this fight because they don't use their defensive cooldowns when the boss does the AoE, unavoidable damage, and they're standing in swirlies. So I hope that helps everybody. It's a great dungeon. I got it built with avoidance on it Probably going to use it, probably not. I don't know. Kind of bad stats for Paladin. You can also click this Titan Defense Orb to get teleported out. That was it for this 18 Halls of Infusion. If you got value from it, let me know in the comment section below, and also show your appreciation by giving this video a big thumbs up and also subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, I have made a video breaking down what you need to know in order to handle this next week's affixes in the most efficient way possible. And I also discuss each class individually and what are the tools that they can best deal with the new affix entangling. If you haven't watched it already, I suggest to take a look at it. Thank you very much for watching this one, and I will see you in the next video.